You wake up every day knowing that you're trying. So why does it still not feel like enough? You want to feel energized. You want to feel like your effort is building towards something. But instead, you may feel tired, unmotivated, and unclear when your break's finally going to come, when life will feel more stable, when you'll feel more in control. So you'll look for answers. You turn to a peer, a colleague, someone successful, and the message is usually familiar. Work harder, stay more disciplined, figure out what you're good at, push through. And honestly, that advice feels good at first. It sounds actionable. It sounds hopeful. It sounds better than cynicism. So you try. Maybe even see some short-term progress. But it doesn't usually hold. It's not sustainable. And it's not as rewarding as you thought it would be. And eventually, something starts to break down. Then the doubt creeps in. Maybe no one really values me. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm arrogant for even thinking I was capable of more. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. Because when your effort and reality stop lining up, people often turn that pain into a verdict about who they are. But that does not automatically mean that you're lazy, broken, or failing. Sometimes the issue is not your character. Sometimes it's your capacity. Sometimes it's the conditions around you. Sometimes it's that the needs under strain that no one taught you to see. The challenge is that we were conditioned to individualize problems that are often shaped by structural forces, environmental conditions, and unmet needs. Because it's much easier to diagnose a person as flawed than to question whether the systems around them are flawed too. If the problem is the individual, then the larger structure stays intact. The rules stay intact. The story stays intact. And people can keep believing that the way things work is fair, normal, and correct. And that matters more than a lot of people realize, because once you start admitting that the environment might be part of the problem, things get more complicated. Now, you have to question the culture, the incentives, the expectations, the conditions that people are being asked to function under. And historically, that's never been easy. For a long time, the fastest way to create conflict within your group was to challenge the way the group made sense of the world. So people learned to focus on the individual instead. And that's how we ended up with these shallow expectations. If you feel off, you must not appreciate what you have. If you lack motivation, you must be undisciplined. If you do not know your purpose, you must not know yourself that well. And if the advice you were given does not work, you must have not wanted it bad enough. But those expectations are often too shallow. They stop at the person without asking what that person is standing inside of. And that's where a lot of misunderstanding begins. Because if everything were truly up to the individual, then people would have to be far more equal than they actually are. They would have to think the same, need the same things, have the same level of support, have the same level of stability, have the same emotional capacity, the same energy, the same opportunities, and the same environments to function inside of. But we know that's not true, which means the way struggle is often explained to us is incomplete from the start. And this is where Maslow's hierarchy of needs becomes useful, not as a pyramid to memorize, but as a pattern to recognize. Because underneath all of human behavior, people are trying to meet needs. Some are basic, some are emotional, some are social, some are tied to meaning, identity, and purpose. And the problem is that Maslow is often taught like life moves in a clean, predictable order. First, your basic needs are met. Then, your safety needs are met. Then, love and belonging show up. Then confidence, then purpose. Then eventually, you become the best version of yourself. And honestly, that would be a beautiful story. But real life is messier than that. You can be loved, but have no stability. You can carry responsibility without rest. You can have purpose, but no real sense of belonging. You can achieve things publicly while feeling deeply off internally. So when life does not feel the way it's supposed to feel, people often turn on themselves. Where did I go wrong? What do I need to fix? Why does this seem easier for other people than it feels for me? But sometimes the better question is not what's wrong with me. Sometimes it is what need is under strain. And just as important, is that strain coming from me or from the environment that I'm trying to function in? And once you understand that, it becomes a lot easier to see why purpose is not always accessible when people act like it should be. So we go through life trying to find our purpose. And when people talk about purpose, they usually talk about it as if it's obvious once you find it. Like it'll feel natural, energizing, meaningful, like the thing that you've always meant to do. And there is some truth in that. When something's deeply aligned with you, it often does feel lighter. You feel more engaged, more motivated, more alive inside of it. Purpose can give people meaning, direction, and a stronger sense of who they are. So it makes sense that people talk about it so often. But what gets left out is how hard purpose can be to access in the first place. Because purpose does not happen in a vacuum. You need enough support to direct energy towards something that matters to you. You need enough stability to reflect, adjust, and stay connected to it over time. You need enough self-awareness to know what actually matters to you. And enough distance from pressure to separate your real values from the values other people handed to you. And that's where things get complicated. Because now we're not just talking about passion, we're talking about environment. We're talking about whether the life you are living gives back enough to support the parts of you that are trying to grow. And when it does not, people start optimizing for survival instead. So instead of discovering purpose, they inherit a version of it, one built around productivity, approval, fear, family pressure, status, or the needs of the system around them. And that inherited purpose can feel real for a while because it's familiar, rewarded, and socially legible. But often it's not purpose in the deeper sense. It's adaptation. A lot of what helps people survive in the short term doesn't help them thrive in the long term. So what looks like purpose can sometimes be a life organized around what feels safest, most accessible, and most necessary to survive. And if that goes on long enough, your role becomes to serve the environment until you burn out inside of it. The same issue shows up in expectations and advice, because advice is usually given in a broad, universal language. And if what worked for one person should work the same way for everyone else, but hidden inside of a lot of advice are assumptions. Assumptions that the person receiving it has enough rest to follow through in a sustained way, enough safety in their life to not be stuck in consistent stress and survival mode, enough emotional bandwidth to stay consistent, enough support from family, friends, or the community to fill in the gaps where life gets heavy, enough opportunity, tools, and feedback from the environment to actually make progress, and enough control over their circumstances for effort to meaningfully influence outcomes. A lot of the time, those assumptions go completely unnoticed. So you can take two different people, give them the exact same advice, and get two very different results. One person hears be more disciplined in an environment with stability, support, and clear feedback. Another person hears that same advice under chronic stress, financial strain, emotional exhaustion, and unclear outcomes. On paper, the advice is the same, but in practice, it lands in two completely different nervous systems. And that matters, because a lot of advice reflects the conditions of the person giving it. It comes from people who succeeded under a specific set of circumstances. So what worked for them feels universally true. But what worked may have depended on stability that they barely noticed, support they normalized, and environments they actually rewarded their efforts. And even then, it would still assume the other person has a similar temperament, similar strengths, similar interests, and similar internal ways of functioning. And that does not mean that advice is useless. Sometimes it really is helpful, but too often advice gets treated like proof. If it works, you are doing things right. And if it fails, you must not want it bad enough. And that's where advice stops being supportive, and it starts becoming a source of doubt, shame, and burnout. So when life feels off, the answer is not always that you need more discipline, more purpose, or better advice. Sometimes you need a better way to read what actually is happening. Let's tie this back to areas of life where people feel these pressures most: work, family, and social expectations. Because across all three, we are constantly being told what we should be doing. What is often missing is the real understanding of the person those expectations are being placed on. At work, most people want to contribute. They want to do well. They want to feel useful, respected, and effective. But when performance becomes inconsistent, people often get reduced to labels like unmotivated, difficult, or disengaged. And sometimes that is far too simplistic because many workplaces are unstable. One week you're doing great. The next week you are somehow the problem. Some environments are political, draining, unclear, and deeply misaligned with what people actually need to function well. People get told to just figure it out, just push through, just be more proactive. But motivation is not purely internal. It's also shaped by whether the environment's proving enough clarity, enough support, enough rewards, and enough psychological stability for effort to feel sustainable. Some environments do not just fail to reward effort, they actively drain it. The same things can happen in families. A lot of families are more unstable than they actually appear, financially, emotionally, or both. Some people grow up with criticism instead of encouragement. Some grow up in homes where belonging feels conditional. Some are over-controlled to a point that they never get enough freedom to discover what they actually care about. And then there is inconsistency. Sometimes the people around you are dependable. Other times they are emotionally unavailable, physically absent, or too overwhelmed to offer real support. So a person can grow up inside instability, confusion, or strained belonging and still be told something like, just work hard, believe in yourself, and success will come. And if you spend enough time in an environment that misunderstands you, you can start to misunderstand yourself through its feedback. And then there's social expectations. Do well in school, get the degree, get married, have kids, buy the house, buy the car, get promoted, make your work your identity, keep moving. For some people, that path may genuinely fit. But for many others, it's less a conscious choice and more of an inherited social programming. Because the larger system's not built around individual needs. It's built around what is legible, measurable, stable, and repeatable. So people inherit scripts for what a successful life is supposed to look like, even when those scripts do not actually match who they are. And what gets called purpose can sometimes be something else entirely, a survival adaptation for approval, belonging, and social acceptance. And across all three layers, work, family, and society, the same pattern keeps showing up. Human needs are running invisibly in the background, while inherited expectations take center stage. And those expectations often ask people to drain themselves first, just for the chance to maybe be accepted, maybe be secure, and maybe be rewarded. And once you see that pattern clearly, the question changes. It stops being what's wrong with me, and it becomes what's actually happening here. And the good news is, there are better questions that we can ask. Because once you understand that needs, environment, and capacity all share similar outcomes, you stop treating every struggle like a personal failure. You start reading your life more accurately. The first question is, what need is under strain right now? Because whatever need is unmet will affect how you show up. Your energy, your focus, your motivation, your emotional capacity, it all gets shaped by what is missing. The second question is, what part of my struggle is personal and what part is environmental? Usually it's a combination of both, but they're not always weighted equally. And that matters because once you can tell the difference between what is yours to work on and what's being created by the environment around you, things get clear. You can identify what you can influence now, what needs to be adjusted, and what may not change unless the conditions around you change too. The third question is this advice or expectations I'm receiving assuming a version of stability I do not actually have? Because if your needs are under strain, if your support is inconsistent, or if the incentives around you are misaligned with what actually motivates you, it becomes much harder to bring your best self consistently. And the fourth question is the effort I'm giving connected to a purpose that is actually mine, or is it an inherited one? Because a lot of people are not moving through life from passion, alignment, or meaning. They are moving from fear, approval, shame avoidance, punishment avoidance, or pressure. And those are very different fuel sources. When something is closer to your real values, your real interest, and your real sense of purpose, effort often feels more sustainable. Not always easy, but more coherent, more alive, less forced. So the deeper question becomes, Am I being driven from within, or am I spending my life performing a script I inherited from outside of me? And once you start asking better questions, life does not instantly become easier, but it does become easier to read honestly. And the truth is, life does not come with a tailored guidebook for understanding yourself or your fit in the world. Most of us have to make sense of that through experience, through what motivates us, through what drains us, through what keeps repeating, and through the feedback we get from the environments that we live in. And a lot of people do not need more shame. They need more accurate models of what is happening around them and within them, so they can better understand the forces shaping how they show up. Because when life feels off, the answer is not always that you're failing. Sometimes your needs are under strain. Sometimes the environment around you is distorting what is possible. Sometimes purpose gets buried under stress, pressure, and survival. And sometimes advice fails not because you don't care enough, but because it assumed a version of your life that you do not actually have access to. A version with more stability, more support, more safety, more room to function well. So no, that's not a pyramid to memorize, it's a pattern to recognize. And once you start recognizing that pattern, you can stop blaming yourself for every mismatch and start understanding what your life is actually asking of you. And as always, appreciate you all for watching, and we'll talk again soon.